Welcome on into another edition of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger. And we actually have some football to recap and preview as we now are officially in season. It feels good. You just saw Sam kind of rub his hands together. It's a moment we've been waiting for.
Well, this is, and I will say it to anybody, and I probably have said it on here. This is like Thanksgiving. Like the football season is phenomenal, but you and I both are like, basketball's where it's at. That's our Christmas season, that's our most wonderful time of the year. But this is darn good. I love football season. It's great because you get overreactions, you get football games to watch. It's great.
Well, let's start talking about some of these overreactions here. It's actually a great way to open up because really, week one provided us with some more questions, some more storylines. Let's start off with, for overreactions, Illinois, a game-winning field goal against Toledo to win 30-28 in the final seconds.
What did I say about Toledo?
No, you were right on the money here that this was worth the time to watch.
Yeah.
But the question is, Illinois maybe not as good as we thought entering the season, or is Toledo just that good and we are maybe overreacting from a one-game sample again?
I personally think I don't live too far from Toledo, so I get a lot of kind of, some interaction, and I don't know a lot about them, but I knew enough. Plus I'd seen some prognostications that they anticipate Toledo being very, very good. And had they won, I wouldn't have been shocked, and I wouldn't have said necessarily that it was Illinois' issue. So I think maybe, we're still feeling out what Illinois is. We're not sure if they've they can come back from, and keep up what they did last year. So honestly, I think Toledo's that good, and the jury may still be out on Illinois, maybe.
Well, and I do think there are a couple things to take away from this besides just either feeling like Illinois is never going to win a game or that, you know what I mean, like the overreaction of it. This was an Illinois team that was number one in the country last year in scoring defense. Now they lost a top 5 NFL draft pick from the secondary this past year. They lost their defensive coordinator, who's now the head coach at Purdue. There are some questions there about what the defense can be. They also lost one of their other safeties, who was a really phenomenal player, but they did allow 416 yards from Toledo. And so that's maybe what I'm looking at first, is that defense, is that going to be, and that was a question we asked before the game, not even just about that game specific, but macro level. Is it sustainable what they were able to do last year? And I think the jury's going to be out still on that one. And I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think Illinois, it's hard to replicate that type of defense after you've lost good pieces from it, like integral pieces of that defense. So I think if we have that expectation of their defense, I think we're going to see a letdown. Now, I still think it could be a very, very good defense.
Right.
But we don't know what that defensive coordinator, Walters had a certain system in. Every D coordinator, while maybe running mostly the same type of system, is going to have their tweaks and things, and it may not work the way Ryan Walters did last year.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. But
I also think Toledo's really good.
And that's fair. I think that helps us kind of understand it a little bit better. Try and find the middle ground somewhere in there. A positive story that came out, a bit of a positive surprise, because some of these storylines are kind of just like, I don't really know what to think of this. Let's move to a positive one. In Happy Valley, Penn State fans are pretty happy. Drew Aller wins the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week award for what he did with 325 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns in their win over West Virginia. We already knew the defense was lights out before the season started. We knew they had a great backfield with Nicholas Singleton, and now it looks like they have a quarterback that can help lead them. And it was interesting. I had a conversation recently with Bill Bender of the Sporting News, and we were talking a little bit about it. And he said, I don't know if he's necessarily a game changer, but he goes, Penn State reminds me so much of Michigan last year. And you put J.J. McCarthy in there, and like all the other pieces are already there.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have a championship team. Like, we really need to start looking at Penn State as maybe a championship team. Not that we haven't been, but I mean, it's
a little bit more seriously by more people, maybe.
I think they warrant the hype right now. Like, I think if they're that talented and they're that solid, I think they're that good.
At least this year, it's not a foregone conclusion that it's just Ohio State and Michigan kind of thing.
Yeah.
To where
at this
they're
point,
a legit contender for that East.
The next storyline we'll talk about after we've finished talking about Penn State will be Ohio State, because I mean, some people think the sky's falling in Columbus after they start the season 1-0, which is but
touchdown win.
But there is a discussion to be had there, so we'll have that on the other part. But Penn State now, I mean, they look like a legitimate Big Ten contending team.
Well, and let's look at who they played. I mean, they played a Power 5 conference team too. Now, West Virginia struggled a little bit here and there, but that's a rivalry game too. You know, they have a history of playing, you know, a rivalry game against one another. So you know that even though, you know, Penn State won and convincingly and stuff, that it's still a Power 5 team, and it's still, you know, a rivalry game. So it's not like they played, I don't know, like East Carolina or whatever, you know.
I see what we did there.
Yeah. So I think honestly, I think Penn State is, I mean, it's not a two horse race in the East this year. Not at all.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and let's go ahead then and move to Columbus, where the sky is falling for some. Yes. Others say we're 1-0 after a 20-point win against Indiana.
On the road, too.
On the road. And it's funny because we were talking before we went on the air, and Sam was kind of laughing at the idea that, like, I mean, being an Ohio State head football coach, like, your job isn't just to win games anymore. It's to just beat everybody, like, to a pulp along the trail. The only thing I will say, in maybe on the other side of the pendulum or whatever you want to call this, there is a quarterback question for me there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I believe both can kind of be true, but what we saw from Kyle McCord was not what we're used to from an Ohio State quarterback. Not that he was horrible, but you get what I'm trying to say. It wasn't quite the same level, I feel, that we're used to. Does that mean it's dead for the season, Ohio State football? No. Is there room to grow? Absolutely. Like, all of that can possibly be true. We didn't see Devin Brown a ton, but there's a real question about Ohio State quarterback.
Yeah, there's not a CJ Stroud or a Justin Fields or, you know.
Well, that's part of it too. Like, right? Like,
yeah,
there's Dwayne Haskins, Cardale Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, JT Barrett. Like, the list of quarterbacks to run through there in recent years is ridiculous.
And here's the thing. One of those two could easily turn out into that. They just haven't started yet. They haven't had the starting job, so that, you know, what's the saying? Every great started out as an amateur, you know, like they weren't good at first. Now, that's not to say that, I mean, Ohio State still won by 20 points on the road in the Big Ten. That's not something to thumb your nose at completely. And they beat IU, so that puts a check mark on my side.
Makes you a little happier.
Yeah, but my whole point is, you know, he didn't do anything to lose the game.
Right.
That he just didn't blow the doors off of the IU defense. He just didn't. So, but you're right. I think either one of those quarterbacks could be absolutely good, but McCord just got the start and didn't wow everybody right away.
It's going to be something to watch, because as good as Penn State looked in a couple of the areas we had question marks for them, Ohio State did not look so good in a couple of those areas we had question marks. So if those trends continue, I might favor Penn State over Ohio State. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's say it this way. Had he been playing East Carolina, maybe he'd have been better.
All right, let's get to this one here. Michigan beats East Carolina in the opener. I don't know what really you take away from it besides J.J. McCarthy looked very, very good against a bad defense. They rolled and didn't miss a beat without Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. I don't know what else to really take away from this game, but Michigan still looks like the Michigan we expected.
Yeah, to this point. I mean, with who they're playing, let's say it this way. I was a little not shocked, but a little like, whoa, because it was only like 20-3 or something like that at the half or whatever it was. But they stretched it out and just, they did exactly what we assumed and figured they would do against East Carolina.
So there's a couple other, I think, storylines to pick apart. I really felt like week one actually gave us a lot to talk about or continue to ask. Iowa beats Utah State 24-14. They scored touchdowns on their first two drives of the ball game.
What was that? The little trivia that I gave you? They scored on a touchdown pass on their opening drive for the first time since 1991.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I pulled up some fun facts about 1991 because I thought that was just such a great stat. A, I wasn't alive.
Correct.
I feel like that's a good place to start. B, we were all introduced to Hasta la Vista.
Baby.
That was, Terminator 2's release. What was the top song? I'm going from memory.
I want to say Salt and Pepper was in there.
Might have been, but I think the top was Bryan Adams. Is that his?
Yeah, that's is it the I don't even remember what song it was.
Everything I do,
Robin Hood. Yes,
I do it for you. Like that was the top song. Yeah, you know. Hey, I'm serving it up. We got a couple of cups of coffee in us. We're ready to go.
The Dream Team, the original Dream Team, had not even been hadn't won their gold medal yet.
I think that was Jordan's first title, was 91. Like Jordan wasn't even a world champ until
they beat the Lakers in 91.
Until Iowa. If Iowa never scored a passing touchdown, would Jordan's legacy be different? Let's discuss on ESPN's First Take next. No, but also Mike Krzyzewski, his first NCAA title came in 1991. His first.
Yeah. He'd made it to some deep tournament runs, but he'd never won the national championship. Yeah.
So
to think, and Kurt Ferentz's response, they said some reporter told him that, and he goes, "Huh, that's some good trivia." That was his answer. Period. That was it.
It's the most Iowa thing in the world. All right, but we've had our fun. Mm-hmm. Iowa's offense wasn't 100% healthy. Cade McNamara, take that into context, but is there something here?
Maybe they still didn't hit their 25-point mark that Brian Ferentz has to keep his job
for the contract
year. Which honestly, can that hurt? Will that hurt him potentially in games where he, a field goal would be okay, but oh no, we're going for 7 right now because we've got to get to that 25. Or is he like his dad where he's not going to think too much about it?
I just imagine the stubbornness is so off the charts that like the stubbornness isn't even about like the contract, like the stubbornness into doing whatever it is they want to do anyway. Right. But I do think that's an interesting like alternative play out to things, or like if this was happening at another school to see how they would handle this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because they're up 17 to whatever, or not 21 to whatever, 21, they're down 21-24, and they're like, oh, we only averaged 23 points. We need more points. We need to put 7 on the board.
Well, I like the idea at first of where you said they had 17 points. They scored a touchdown and they look over the sideline and Brian and Kirk are both holding up 2. We're going for 2. We got to hit 25.
That's it. Okay. That would be a bit. I wish I'd have thought quick enough. It's too early in the morning. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's interesting to think, or are they just, we're not going to take that in consideration. If we're successful and win ball games and I'm under 25 points, will they still hold true to you're out the door?
Yeah. I'm pretty interested in all this too, which by the way, To answer the question, like Iowa's offense continued to feature the tight end heavy. I don't expect really, like we talked about, there doesn't seem to be any changes with the offense. It's just putting in some new Jimmies and Joes and seeing if this thing actually is able to be executed. And I thought it showed a pulse.
Response. That's a Farron's response. We're not changing anything except for putting new people in it.
That's right. But I thought it showed a pulse where, I mean, there was zero pulse last year. I thought there was a legitimate pulse to the Iowa offense, and there might be something there for the rest of the year. Couple other stories that came out. By the way, this is one that I don't think people are talking about. We don't really need to go deep here. But Maryland's Talia Tagovailoa hit 8,000 career passing yards over the weekend in the win against Towson. First Maryland quarterback to ever hit that mark, but that's ridiculous number. So that's quite the milestone, I thought, that to come out from over the weekend that hasn't gotten attention.
There's a good chance he hits 10,000.
Yeah.
By the end of the year.
Oh, we'll need to. I think I have somewhere the Big Ten record book. I might try pulling it up here in the background to see how many quarterbacks have hit 10,000. But also from the opening weekend, Rutgers Northwestern, I'm just going to fully admit, did not watch this game. The score came
Rutgers won. That's all I know.
And it came out 24-7. That sounds about right. Like I think Rutgers is good enough to pick up a couple Big Ten wins. I think Northwestern's going to have a really rough year. Based on the adversity, and the roster was already a bit shorthanded, it felt like, comparatively to the rest of the Big Ten Conference. Moving on from there, let's talk about the Purdue Boilermakers, your team losing to Fresno State 39-35. And by the way, I'm not necessarily trying to drown that or drip that in shame when I say that your team lost, but what did you take away from the debut of the Walters era?
I take away from this, and I have to admit, my son had a JV football game at that time, so I didn't get to watch it, but I was watching it on my phone, the progression of it, the play-by-play stuff or whatever, and what I took from it is the defense still isn't working fully. I mean, you gave it 39 points to a Fresno State team. Now, not saying Fresno State's trash, but you should be able to beat a Fresno State at home, and so I think the defense is still needing to solidify. The nice thing is it's out of conference, so they didn't have a first game conference game to where all of a sudden they're 0-1 in the conference like they were last year.
Right.
Excuse me. So they have that, but the offense looked and sounded like maybe there was a little bit of adjustments needing or taking place, and it struggled a little bit in points, but they put 35 points on the board. You should be able to win a game with 35 points on the board, period. Yeah. You should have. The defense last year gave up almost 28 points a game, and that's all games. And they should have been able to not give up 39 and beat Fresno State. So it's a disappointment, but yet at the same time, they're still Ryan Walters. That was his first game as a head coach, so he's got that under his belt, and so I think how they rebound this coming week is maybe my prognosis for the season.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, everybody, as we've already kind of joked about a little bit, there's such extreme takes with everything that we've seen in week one, and everybody wants the definitive answers or punctuations on everything. And it just,
I'm not changing my prediction yet.
Yeah, well, well, that's another discussion we can talk about. For the listeners that missed that, Sam has Purdue winning the Big Ten West in the final year of divisions.
Still can do it.
Still could. But I mean, you're right. It's the opener of the Walters era. It's his first game as head coach. It's this team's first game of the season. Like, I think there's plenty of room for error when we get to week one college football. And that was kind of the story with the team that I have an interest in, Michigan State. First half,
it was a struggle.
Yeah, it was going uphill. Like it was tough sledding for Michigan State's offense. I guess we could say, because defensively, I mean, the Spartans played pretty well all game long on defense, but the offense started clicking in the second half. Noah Kim in the second half alone went 8 for 10 passing with 2 touchdowns. The receivers started to come out and make some plays. It seemed like the offense actually kind of found a bit of a rhythm in that second half, where the first half, it just wasn't there. Like there just was no rhythm. There wasn't really a gel, but it came together in that second half. And I also think Michigan State might have a pretty solid running game led by Nathan Carter. The UConn transfer was really impressed with what he did with the ball in his hand. So I think Michigan State is, if they continue to play like they did in the second half, Michigan State could really surprise a couple people.
Yeah, and that I noticed the first half, it was almost halftime, and it might have even made it to the half 7-3. And I was like, whoa, this is – I even told somebody, I said, ooh, Dalton might not be happy right now. That's all I said. And
I think they took the lead right before halftime, if I remember. So it was 10-7. But to your point, like it was getting close there, and it was 7-3. I remember kind of looking around, and I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
But that offense completely regrouped for that second half. So that was a good sign. But as we said, you open up, and for Noah Kim, the quarterback, and a couple of the receivers and whatnot, like those were their first starts. Those were first games for a lot of them. Just take them a little bit of time to get in a groove, and they certainly did.
Yeah. Well, it's still one of those that it's week one. Overreactions on both sides, we're going to be world beaters like the team that Nebraska plays this week. I hear people saying they're going to be contenders. For what? They're in rough shape still. They're still unproven.
So that provides a great segue, because it's time now to get to this upcoming week's slate of games and what we're expecting. But I will let you know, I did pull up the Big Ten record book. There have been 7 quarterbacks to hit 10,000 yards passing in the Big Ten.
Are 2 of them from Purdue?
2 of them are from Purdue. Yeah.
Drew Brees is obviously one, and I want to say Aiden O'Connell's number 2.
No.
Is it Orton?
Curtis Painter.
Oh, geez, I forgot about Curtis Painter.
Curtis Painter's number 2.
Definitely have forgotten about Curtis Painter.
But yeah, so there have been 7. Like that's the kind of class that Talia could end up joining when it's all said and done with his days in College Park. But okay, let's go ahead and take a look at week 2. Not the most exciting slate of games coming at you here this weekend involving the Big Ten.
No, but there are some interesting matchups.
And let's start with the one that you just kind of teased a moment ago. Nebraska gets ready to take on, in Boulder, number 22, Colorado, after what was there were 3 results or games that stunned me in week 1 nationally, not Big Ten wise. Duke dominating Clemson, stunner
not just
to me.
beating them, blowing them out.
Florida State flat out bullying LSU, stunned me. Like I thought that'd be a good game. Seeing Florida State just run over LSU defenders like 6 different times, like that was. I don't know if I've ever had the picture of LSU guys just being bullied like that. Like that was new to me. And the other one, of course, is Colorado beating TCU. Like this is a Colorado team that was expected to win 3 games this year. I mean, they bring in Deion Sanders. He clears out the roster, brings in his own guys.
And he talks one whale of a game.
Oh, yeah. Like, well, and all of a sudden, like the most entertaining thing in college football is Deion Sanders in Colorado football. Like, it doesn't matter if they're not playing in the Big Ten or they're playing Big Ten competition, because I know we're a Big Ten show here.
Right.
I'm going to have eyes on Boulder, because it's can't miss CTV now. It is phenomenal stuff.
I saw an interesting stat, or observation, I guess. Last year, you could attend every single Colorado home football game for $222 total.
Wow.
There are tickets for the game this week, $450 a piece.
That is wild. I mean, it's and what's amazing to me too is like this is a phenomena that I don't necessarily recall any kind of precedent, where here comes a coach who was maybe the greatest defensive back of all time. Like he was, he excelled.
Definitely in the conversation for one of.
Yeah. He was unbelievably excellent at what he did in football. He was excellent in baseball. He's always had a mouth. Like he's always been able to talk. He's always been a bit of a showman. And he brings it to coaching, which is a tough transition, I feel like. Usually a lot of loudmouth athletes don't become coaches. And I think because of that, he was sent down a tougher route where he has to go through the HBCU trail to be able to get his coaching job, picks up some wins. Now he gets a job at Colorado. And here's what I think so unprecedented about this too. Colorado was not supposed to be very good this year. And by the way, we'll see what happens in the future. Like TCU is probably not as good as we thought TCU was going to be. To get to Sam's point about overreactions, Colorado, I don't see competing for a national championship all of a sudden or anything like that.
I don't even know that they compete for a Pac-12, honestly.
No, and that's fair. I mean, the Pac-12 is loaded. For its final year. But regardless, Colorado's blown by whatever expectation you had for them already after just 1 week. And that's hard to say. And that's realistic. It's not hyperbole. Like they've blown past whatever expectation you had for them.
There was nobody that anticipated them beating TCU. Nobody.
No.
Except for maybe a few Colorado fans and maybe not very many of them even.
And so Colorado goes out, they get Deion Sanders this past offseason to try and help the program because the program was in a dark place. Like the program was, I think, undisputedly the worst Power 5 program as of last year to be at. Deion takes that job. They interview the AD after the hiring, like at the press conference, and he goes, "Yeah, we don't really have the money for it now, but we're hoping to figure that out." And you're sitting there, and you're like, "What?" Like you just
they signed him to a $28 million contract without having the money to give him.
You just pushed all chips to the middle of the table on this phenomena, and who knows if this stuff works out. And now, as you talk about ticket prices and everything else, this Deion thing has worked out. Like it's already kind of paid for itself in social capital. Like we know, but we didn't talk about Colorado ever. And now look at Colorado. I'm saying they're the one team, regardless of who they play, I will be watching every Saturday because it's can't miss TV.
Like I said, he talks one whale of a game and he gets people excited because after that statement was made by the AD, there was $26 million donated by alums. And then his the season tickets sold out.
Yeah.
So they went from seeing the whole season for $222 to there's not a ticket to be had.
Yeah.
Because they want to see what Deion, they either want to see him fail or they're just so excited. I lean more towards the latter instead of the prior, but there are people that will buy tickets just to, see him fail, which is the wrong way to go to a game. But anyways. Well, I'm not going to an IU game that doesn't involve Purdue just to root against IU. I'm not doing it.
Well, and I have a hard time, and maybe this is a bit of a gap because I didn't get to experience Deion very much as the player. I know about Deion the player, but I didn't experience it in real time. And so maybe there's some whatever animosity some people are feeling, maybe it carries over from those days. But I'm having a hard time hating on the Deion experience. This guy has showed up everywhere and won immediately. And that's hard to do.
You know why I didn't like Deion Sanders?
Why's that?
He wasn't on my team. No, that is dead serious.
Fair enough.
Like, he was that good and dominant. Like, you didn't throw to his side when he was playing. You did not do it because inevitably, if you did, there would be a much less chance of you getting any completions or a good likelihood it gets picked or pick sixth.
Yep.
Yeah, that whatever. A pick six happens. I'm not sure what the past tense
of
that is, but my point is I mean, the man is the only person in the history of sports to hit a home run in the World Series and score a touchdown in the same week.
Yeah.
That's the type of athlete the man was, and he's carrying it over. And you're absolutely right. Most of the time, the talkers, they don't translate well into coaching. But he is the exception to the rule. He has very much at least proven himself on a lower level. And after week one of his first Power 5 week, He's doing it at this level too.
Well, and that's I enjoy watching it. I mean, he's kind of doing his own thing. Like we talk about unprecedented. He's kind of blazing his own trail, and I find that fascinating to watch.
For sure.
But let's switch back to the Big Ten perspective of it.
Let's get off that.
Nebraska goes to Boulder in this game, where Nebraska last week, I think you could say defensively looked good, but offensively did not. It's obviously going to be a run-heavy attack. I do believe before last week's games, Nebraska was favored against Colorado, but after what happened, they flipped, and Colorado's now favored against Nebraska.
Well, it's -3, so essentially you're looking at a push because you get 3 points for being home.
Right.
So we're essentially looking at basically a push in the eyes of Vegas.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. But for Nebraska, I think defensively they might be able to cause a couple of issues for Colorado's offense. It's kind of hard just with the momentum to say anything bad about Colorado because it was such a good performance.
Right.
But I think Nebraska will be able to present some issues defensively that TCU could not to Colorado. My big question is, what will Nebraska be able to do offensively, especially as it seems like they're a bit more one-dimensional? Again, they only threw, I think, 19 passes, and they had 3 interceptions.
Right. Yeah. They're going to be or run heavy. Their quarterback runs a lot. So
That's what I mean.
Sims can run the ball.
Yes.
Which gives you, let's say it this way, if he can complete more than half of his passes, but you have that run question mark, it's going to maybe open up those avenues, and the passing game will open up. Those small amount of passes might be effective passes. Let's say it that way, because he can run. He can run at any point. So if you lock down on the receivers, you're giving him running room. So I don't know much about Colorado's defense on whether or not that's going to be a big. I think it would be a tough thing to prepare for any team, honestly. And Minnesota, I mean, they struggled to keep him at bay. They on the running aspect of it. So it's just I don't know. All intents and purposes, Nebraska should be 1-0. This should be 2 undefeated teams going in and playing each other. But they fumbled and threw it away, Nebraska against Minnesota last week. So, but that's in the past. Let's forget that. Let's make the improvements. And I think the big thing here is the coaching. I think Matt Rule is the type of coach that he's done this in college programs that have been dumpster fires when he came in, and all he does is improve them. So I have the confidence in him that they're going to be at least a little bit better than they were last week in every facet that they struggled.
Fair. It's a fair assessment, and I'm pretty excited about this one. Like I said, this is can't miss for me. I will be watching in some way, somehow, even though I plan on being at a football game in East Lansing.
Cyhawk.
That's the next big game exactly I wanted to get to, which, by the way, this is one of those rivalries I really find myself enjoying each year.
No for whatever reason, in it, but it always seems to be a good game.
Yeah, and it also seems to be one of the ones that fan bases care about an extraordinary amount. But Iowa State, they play, let's see, that's at 3:30 on Saturday. Iowa's favored by 4 in Ames, going on the road to Iowa State. This is one I'm pretty excited for.
I'm interested, again, to see where the offense for Iowa is, because Iowa State, to me, is probably a better team than West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And so how's that offense going to perform against a better defense?
You meant Utah State, right? Iowa played Utah State last week.
What'd I say?
Penn State or West Virginia. Sorry. Penn State played West Virginia.
Better than Utah State. That's what I meant. Sorry.
Yep.
They're better than Utah State, obviously. So what are they going to do against a better defense? Is that offense going to struggle more, or did they actually cure things? And with McNamara being healthier, will he, will we see a different offense? That's what I'm interested to see. And I always, I'm like you. I'm always interested in seeing what happens at the Cyhawk. Don't know why.
It's a fun game. It really is a fun game.
Fun to say Cyhawk.
It is a good rivalry name. We need better rivalry names. I mean, those are the two biggest games from there. Wisconsin plays Washington State at Washington State Saturday night.
That could be a good game.
But from what I saw from Wisconsin in that season opener when they had over Buffalo, like I like the Badgers here. I think that backfield is just too strong for anybody. I've been talking about how much I like Tanner Mordecai. I think he's going to serve the Fickle era's start in a great way. I think Wisconsin's too much, but
the one thing I noticed about that game was, and I noticed it, I kind of noticed, but then I heard it reiterated on the radio, is with the threat of Tanner Mordecai being able to run and throw, Braylon Allen was getting to the second level without being touched, and he didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Like he was anticipating being hit at the line and getting his yards. And before he was touched, it was the second, sometimes the third level before he was touched. He was kind of shocked.
Yeah.
and he, if that is what the way it's going to be, and granted, it's a lower level team that they were playing in Buffalo, but still to have that, having never had that before, and you've played teams like Buffalo in the past, and you've never had that, and now you do. It could be something interesting to see with what Wisconsin does.
Yeah. No, I think that one maybe warrants because of what you threw out there. Like I had Wisconsin winning the West beforehand. I only felt better after seeing that season opener. I really like what they got going for this year. Outside of that, I'll run through the other matchups. Michigan State hosts Richmond. It's the first time these two schools have ever met. That's at 3:30 on Saturday. Noon Saturday, number 5 Ohio State hosts Youngstown State. What seems to be a Peacock game of the week every now and then. Number 7 Penn State will host Delaware, also at noon on Saturday. We talked about Colorado, Nebraska. That's at noon. I didn't give that time earlier. That's a noon kick for those two teams. Purdue goes to Virginia Tech. Purdue trying to bounce back after we talked about dropping the opener to Fresno State. Virginia Tech is favored by 3 points here, as Sam kind of mentioned. Ultimately kind of means this is a push because it is in Blacksburg, so they get the 3 points being the home team. It seems like Vegas doesn't really know what to do with this game. I don't know what to do with this game. I think we'll hopefully learn a little bit more about Purdue from what we see this upcoming Saturday.
Agreed. It can only, well, I won't say that. Never mind. Go ahead. I was going to say it can only get better, and then I'm like, maybe not.
It could very well get
worse. You're right.
Michigan continues the very soft non-conference schedule with UNLV coming to Ann Arbor.
That's the game that they're splitting the head coaching responsibilities. One guy's coaching the first half, and then Mike Hart's coaching the second half. I don't remember who's coaching the first half.
If Michigan wants to continue to schedule its non-conference schedule quite like this, I mean, they might as well just let it a fan giveaway contest be able to come coach the games. I mean,
ladies and gentlemen, enter for your chance to coach the second half against UNLV.
They're favored by 37.
And that's gracious, I think.
We talked about the Cyhawk game. Northwestern host UTEP. That is at 3:30 on Saturday. I was just looking
at that. You can get tickets for $2 if you want.
Do you want? Are you going to drive to Evanston for that one, Sam?
No. The Cubs play in town, so if that was anticipated, I could go to that, but no, I'm not. It's probably at the same time.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I'm not. No.
Wisconsin and Washington State, we talked about. That's at 7:30 that night. Maryland plays Charlotte. That's at 7:30 that night as well. Saturday night, that is. Minnesota and Eastern Michigan will kick at 7:30 at night. Minnesota favored by nearly 3 touchdowns in that one. And also on Saturday, Rutgers will host Temple at 7:30. But tonight, Friday night, there's a couple of Big Ten games involved that we could touch on here real quick. Indiana will host Indiana State. That's at 7 o'clock tonight here on Friday. And Kansas and Illinois will be kicking off at 7:30. I'm kind of interested in this one. Kansas had a pretty big year for the program last year. Illinois had a big year for its program as well last year. But as we know, and we've talked a little bit about, kind of skated by Toledo in the season opener. They now go to Kansas. Kansas favored by 3 points, as we've talked about already. That kind of means it's a push between Illinois and Kansas in the eyes of Vegas without the home field advantage. This seems to be the game that maybe I'm most excited for, besides the Cyhawk and Nebraska, Colorado.
Yeah, because let's say it this way: it was first on the list of this week's games, but it caught my attention right away because of what Kansas did last year. Both teams did last year, and you have those question marks about Illinois. Kansas may not be as good as they were last year. They may be better. We don't know yet. We're 1 week in, so your assessment of teams can only be 1 week. And right now, Kansas is as good as they were last year. At this point last year, they were 1-0 as well. But this could be the first. Well, I won't say first true test because I really think Toledo's good. It could be it could be for the nation a real first true test to see what Illinois is this year. If they walk out of Lawrence 2-0, there might be more people talking about Illinois saying, well, and I guess how they do it. If they have a dominant defensive game and walk out of Lawrence 2-0, they could say, well, let's put Illinois in the talk for the West. It's definitely a possibility. Or if they give up 38 points but still walk out with a win, it's not too sure how they're going to do against the likes of Michigan or Wisconsin even, because I do believe Wisconsin's better than Kansas, So
I completely agree with that. I think it's at this point, there's so many games where you're just looking to get more information on some of these teams. And this seems like one of those, probably for both ways, Kansas and Illinois. Before we close out this week's show, I did want to get to this because I know you had texted me, you wanted to talk about this a little bit, but the NCAA was in the news again. You're shaking your head. I know that you're pretty upset about this one, but a star defensive lineman from LSU, Mason Smith was suspended for the opener against Florida State.
The entire game.
The
entire game.
Yes. I do believe, I haven't dug into as many details, so you can help fill in some of the gaps here, but he had done an autograph signing, and it must have been before NIL actually came into existence.
It was a week or two before NIL went into effect.
Okay.
So we all knew it was going to be going in, and they gave us a date. At this point, this is when it's legal. It was a couple of weeks before NIL went into effect.
Okay.
Which we look at, that's 2 years ago.
Yep. And so now the NCAA comes down and drops the hammer on him and makes him miss the season opener. It seems like a pretty ludicrous story. And it had you pretty upset and emotional yesterday.
My reasoning is you go back to when Johnny Manziel was in the NCAA, and that was many moons ago.
Yep.
He had the same thing happen. He went to an autograph session or went to autographed a bunch of things for a company that was selling them, and he knew this, and the NCAA dropped the hammer on him for 1/2 against Rice. 1/2, and that's when the last regime was in power, and they dropped the hammer on Johnny Manziel for 1/2 against Rice. But yeah, Charlie Baker comes in and says he's really going to work on this. We're going to gear it towards the student athlete. We're going to make sure that they're being taken care of. And then he drops the hammer of a full game against the number 8 ranked Florida State Seminoles in week 1. Even 1/2, I think, would have been, I would have been like, that's ridiculous. Because I think he probably did it. And you know what? He may have done it knowing that he was violating the NIL. Not all the players probably went, oh, hey, I have to wait until this date. That's not excusing him.
And he is reported saying that he did not know he was breaking the rule. So from his word, he says that was not the case. But what's amazing to me too, and like you stacked the Manziel conversation and situation against this one. NIL wasn't really a discussion back when Manziel was doing this.
In the process of being legal. Like, it wasn't in like, oh, it's just a couple of weeks away. That's, again, still wrong. So yes, punish him, but you can't. Why are you punishing him worse than you did the guy 8 years ago who did it when it wasn't even in the purview of becoming able to do? And he gets a half against Rice. No offense to Rice, but Rice ain't Florida State.
Yep. Well, and what's amazing to me too is, especially given the litany of problems that exist today in college athletics and everything that's there, that this is where the NCAA makes it stand. It feels so much to me with each story that comes out like this, each case that comes out like this, that the NCAA is clinging on to whatever shred of power and authority they feel they have left. And I do feel like this is a structure and institution that is obviously struggling and backpedaling a little bit with how things are currently going. They're starting to realize they don't quite have the power to enforce and put in like a national rule for NIL. That's why they keep going to Congress and saying, can you please help us out? Because we actually don't have power. But the power we do have, let's abuse it by suspending a star defensive lineman for signing autographs for money a week or so, whatever it was, before NIL came into effect. Like, to me, it's such a wrong pivot on what the NCAA needs to be doing, what needs to be focused on, especially in the current times we exist in. Like,
the
NCAA is losing authority. It's losing so many of these battles. And it's just going to go pushing right into something like this instead of working on a pivot and adjusting to the current times. It feels like a total failure. Sounds like a harsh word, but it kind of sounds like they failed here.
Well, and it also feels like they're insulting our intelligence.
Yeah, it's true too.
And I've got another example that I didn't even mention to you because I wanted to kind of throw it on you to see what your thoughts were on this. Because essentially, with NIL, what are we treating these players like? Are they amateurs? No, they're getting paid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're not getting paid for their performance. I get that. So technically, they're amateurs. But I believe it was Rashada at Arizona State that was at Florida. Sure. That was at Florida, and he committed to Florida because a collective gave him a guaranteed $10 million.
I did see something about this.
And then the collective yanked the offer, so he transferred to Arizona State, or decommitted and committed to Arizona State, where he's getting only $817,000 for his NIL deal. My point, here's where I'm going with this.
Which, by the way, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I know you got a whole thought, but that's pay for play. Like, we're talking about pay for play.
Exactly.
At this point.
That's what I'm getting at here. That is exactly what I'm getting at, because the U.S. Tennis Open just is starting to wrap up. Fiona Crawley is one of the top players at UNC. And college players are allowed to participate in these events, the open events, as long as they're allowed to collect money to pay for their travel and their room and board and stuff like that.
Yep.
But they have to forego any winnings. She ended up winning a few rounds and would have collected $81,000. $81,000, okay, as a tennis player. Now, granted, I understand that's winnings for her performance.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, it to me is no different than Rashada going to at first Florida for $10 million and then decommitting and going to Arizona State for $817. That's pay for play. Just like her winnings would have been. And we're talking about $81,000 in a college sport that there's no way in the world she's going to get that in NIL.
It's 10% what the commit you're talking about just
ended up getting
to get it. Yeah, I was going to say, and hers is reward based. And by the way, this all of this is so complex, where like a part of this that we're not even talking about in this story is the fact that, and I do believe this has been part of the broader discussion, but it hasn't been, at least here so far on this segment. Yeah. the idea that people are offering student athletes and not coming through with their end of the deal,
criminal.
That's happening a lot. This you're just not hearing about it as much, but that's happening a lot. So that's one issue. And then, yeah, you're right. Like, so again, for the NCAA to be going after LSU's defensive lineman for signing autographs, and that's name, image, and likeness, what he was doing, but it happened a week or so before NIL came into effect years ago. For them to drop the hammer there, but then pay for play, that's exactly what I was talking about. Like, it's such a specific and great example, Sam, of what I mean when I say there's such a litany of issues. Here's one of them. You have student athletes being offered money to come to schools. Sometimes they show up on campus and the money just now isn't there. They go somewhere else where they'll pay to have that student come play. They being different boosters, companies, whatever it is. Yep. Like, this is a mess. And you want to go after the guy signing autographs for name, image, and likeness.
Or the tennis player having to forego $81,000, which, you know, I mean, good on her being loving college enough to say, you know what, I'm going to give it back because I want to stay in college. But at the same time, there should be, the NCAA makes so many rules and makes so many exceptions in different areas.
Yep.
How is this not possible to where if you go to an open, which means anybody can play as long as you qualify, and open, and you don't declare and go to other events and collect money, you can keep what you win in those open events. That's their way of NIL, you know?
Well, and here's the thing with the NCAA, and we've talked about this for a long time, but Sam, we're a couple months away from 2024. We've talked about adjusting with the times, getting a couple steps ahead of what's coming down the tracks. This just continues to show there is not progressive thinking whatsoever, or not even progressive. It's just not even present thinking whatsoever that is taking place there. It's a bit of a shame. Just a shame.
It is, and it to me, it disappoints me in Big Talk Charlie about saying it's about the student athlete or athletic student, whichever way you want to say it, because we know that not a lot of them are going to class, the big namers, but not the point. But he talked a big game and he's doing nothing but the old stuff.
Yep.
That's what's disappointing. You know, you want to maintain your power. You're doing nothing to change. Why in the world would you get support?
Yeah.
I mean, you're dropping the hammer worse than the regime that screwed over the NCAA, you know, and its schools. You're dropping the hammer on an All-American, which he's a defensive end. Would Florida State have dominated as much with him in the game? Maybe they still would have won, but it might have been a heck of a lot closer. It might not have shocked you because you would have been like, wow, what a game. What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh,
no,
it's frustrating.
I'm completely with you. It's it's definitely going to be something to watch. I mean, just the NCAA, its own like conversation piece for years to come on how things continue to evolve or regress or whatever it ends up being with the institution. But that's what we have time for. That's going to shut down another edition of Big Talk.
To hit transparent background, evidently.
We just went away for a moment. Our voices were just coming through the ether. But another edition of Big Talk wrapping up. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in and joining us every week. We'll be breaking down some of these games, previewing future ones every single week. So make sure you continue to join us on Big Talk, college sports with Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. Sam, I wanted to give you a second to flash your graphics up. I'm not sure if you're still going to, but do you just want to tell the people where
I will tell them because I would have to re-download it with a transparent background.
I was trying to fill for a second, but I was like, yeah, it might be.
Drag it out just a little bit longer because I probably could have gotten it, but it's not that big of a deal. You know what? You just have to trust me on this one. Okay. So on TikTok, Instagram, and the platform formerly known as Twitter, we are at B1G_talk. That's B1G, not BIG, Dalton. B1G_talk, Big Talk. Go to Facebook. It's B1G Talk, Big Talk. Not all Big Talk. That's a different show. And we are streamed weekly on the ASAP network. You can get the app at either one of the app stores. the Android or Apple one. You can find us on there. If you miss our stream and want to really see what we're doing while we're talking, you can go to Spotify and find us. But we come out later in the day on Lounge Media Group, and eventually we will be on Lounge Media Group Radio as well with our weekly show. So there you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, seriously, thank you all again for tuning in and joining us. We really do appreciate it. And for this week's edition of Big Talk, that's Sam Sprunger. I'm Dalton Shetler. So long, everybody.
See ya.